I never thought moving a single piece of construction equipment would land someone in jail. But that's exactly what happened when Deborah Patterson decided she was the queen of our neighborhood in Scottsdale, Arizona. My name is Yuri Anderson, and I run a commercial excavation business that's been operating in the Phoenix metro area for over 15 years. I bought my house in the Saguaro Springs subdivision back in 2019, long before Deborah moved in 3 doors down and immediately got herself elected HOA president. The house came with a 3-acre lot, which was one of the main reasons I purchased it. I needed space to occasionally park equipment between jobs, and the property deed clearly stated that commercial vehicles were permitted as long as they weren't visible from the street and didn't create a nuisance. Everything was fine for the first couple of years. I'd park my excavators and dozers behind my house, hidden by a row of mature Palo Verde trees and a solid 8-foot fence. My neighbors never complained. In fact, most of them appreciated having a contractor nearby who could help with their own projects. I'd helped Tom Jenkins next door grade his backyard for a pool, and the Williamson family across the street had me dig out their drainage issues after a particularly bad monsoon season. Then Deborah moved in during the summer of 2022, and within 3 months, she'd somehow convinced enough people to vote her in as HOA president. I should have seen the red flags immediately. During her campaign, she'd gone door to door with a 3-ring binder full of violations she'd documented in just those few weeks. Mailboxes that were the wrong shade of beige, palm trees that needed trimming, and decorative rocks that apparently violated some obscure covenant about landscaping materials. The first letter I received from her arrived on a Tuesday in October. It was typed on official HOA letterhead that she'd apparently had made at a print shop, complete with a little logo she'd designed herself. The letter informed me that my industrial equipment was in violation of Section 4.7 of the HOA covenants and needed to be removed within 14 days or I'd face fines of $100 per day. I read through the letter twice, then pulled out my own copy of the covenants. Section 4.7 did mention restrictions on commercial vehicles, but it specifically exempted properties over 2 acres and required that any restricted vehicles be visible from public streets. My equipment met neither criterion for violation. I was well within my rights. I decided to handle it professionally. I wrote a polite response citing the specific exemptions, included copies of the relevant deed restrictions, and even attached photos showing that my equipment was completely invisible from the street. I hand-delivered it to Deborah's house that Thursday evening. She answered the door in yoga pants and a tank top, her highlighted blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was probably in her late 40s, with the kind of permanent scowl lines that suggested she'd spent most of her life finding things to be upset about. "Can I help you?" she asked, though her tone suggested she'd rather do anything but. "Hi, Deborah. I'm Yuri Anderson from 3 doors down. I wanted to respond to your letter about my equipment." She glanced at the envelope in my hand but didn't take it. The letter was very clear. You need to remove those vehicles. Actually, if you read my response here, you'll see that my property is specifically exempted from that restriction. I've included all the relevant documentation. I don't need to read anything. I'm the HOA president, and I'm telling you those vehicles are a violation. I kept my voice calm. With all due respect, the deed restrictions supersede HOA authority in this case. My property is over 3 acres, and the equipment isn't visible from any public street. Both conditions exempt me from Section 4.7. Her face flushed red. "I don't care what you think your deed says. This is a residential neighborhood, not a construction yard. Those machines are gone in 14 days or you'll be fined. Deborah, I'm trying to be reasonable here. If you just look at the documentation, I've looked at everything I need to look at. 14 days, Mr. Anderson. She closed the door in my face. I stood there for a moment, the envelope still in my hand, trying to decide if I should knock again. Instead, I walked back to my house and called my real estate attorney, Marcus Chen, first thing the next morning. Marcus reviewed everything and confirmed what I already knew. You're completely in the clear, Yuri. The HOA has no authority to restrict your equipment under these circumstances. I'll send them a letter making that clear. Will that be enough to get Deborah to back off? It should be. Most HOA presidents back down once they realize they are on shaky legal ground. The last thing they want is a lawsuit. Marcus sent his letter the following week. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The fines started arriving exactly 14 days after Deborah's initial letter. $100 per day, itemized on official-looking invoices. I didn't pay them. Instead, I filed a formal dispute with the HOA board and requested a hearing. The hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday evening in December at the community center, a small building near the subdivision entrance that mostly hosted kids' birthday parties and yoga classes. I arrived 15 minutes early with Marcus, both of us carrying folders full of documentation. The board consisted of 5 people. Deborah as president, a retired accountant named Gerald Morrison as treasurer, a yoga instructor named Sarah Kim as secretary, and 2 at-large members I'd never met. They sat behind a folding table at the front of the room while about a dozen residents filled the chairs facing them. Deborah called the meeting to order and quickly moved through the standard business, approving the previous month's minutes and discussing the budget for holiday decorations. Then she got to my case. Item 7 on the agenda, the matter of the violation at 4782 Desert Sage Drive. She said my address like it was a crime scene. Mr. Anderson has been parking commercial construction equipment on his property in violation of our covenants. He's refused to remove the equipment and has disputed the fines levied against him. I raised my hand. I'd like to present my case. Deborah's lips pressed into a thin line. You'll have an opportunity to speak. First, I'm going to present the HOA's position. She proceeded to spend 20 minutes talking about the importance of maintaining property values and preserving the residential character of the neighborhood. She showed photos she'd apparently taken with a telephoto lens from the empty lot behind my house, showing my excavator and bulldozer. She claimed the equipment was an eyesore and a safety hazard, and that multiple residents had complained. When she finally finished, I stood up. Thank you for your presentation, Deborah. Now I'd like to address the facts. I walked them through the deed restrictions, showing exactly where my property was exempted. I presented photos from every public street and sidewalk within a quarter-mile of my house, none of which showed any equipment. I even had a survey done showing my lot was 3.2 acres, well above the 2-acre minimum for exemption. The bottom line, I concluded, is that the HOA has no authority to restrict equipment on my property under these specific circumstances. This is clearly documented in the subdivision's founding documents, which supersede any HOA rules. Gerald, the treasurer, cleared his throat. Deborah, I think Mr. Anderson makes a valid point. I reviewed the documents myself, and his property does appear to be exempted. Deborah's face went rigid. We need to maintain standards. If we let one person violate the rules, everyone will think they can do whatever they want. It's not a violation if the rules don't apply, Marcus interjected. And I should mention that if the HOA continues pursuing these fines, Mr. Anderson is prepared to file suit for harassment and abuse of authority." The room went quiet. Sarah, the secretary, leaned over and whispered something to Gerald. The two at-large members shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Finally, Gerald spoke. "I move that we dismiss the fines and acknowledge Mr. Anderson's exemption under the deed restrictions." "Second," Sarah said immediately. Deborah looked like she'd been slapped. "We can't just all in favor," Gerald asked. 3 hands went up. Deborah and one of the at-large members kept their hands down. "Motion passes," Gerald announced. "The fines are dismissed. Mr. Anderson, I apologize for the confusion." I nodded my thanks and gathered my materials. Marcus and I left the community center feeling victorious, though I noticed Deborah watching me with undisguised hatred as we walked out. Over the next few months, Deborah found other ways to make my life difficult. She sent me violation notices for my grass being a 1/4 inch too tall, for having my garbage cans visible from the street 3 hours past the pickup time, and for a small oil stain on my driveway that she claimed was a hazardous material spill. Each time, I documented that I was in compliance or immediately fixed any legitimate issues, but it was exhausting. Then in March, everything escalated. I'd landed a major contract to excavate and grade a site for a new medical complex in Tempe. It was a 6-month project worth nearly $2 million, the biggest job my company had ever secured. The only problem was that the project required a specialized piece of equipment, a 40-ton hydraulic excavator that I didn't own. I needed to rent it, and the rental company, Southwest Heavy Equipment, was based in Tucson. The rental was going to cost me $8,000 a week, so I wanted to pick it up on a Sunday and start work first thing Monday morning. The transport company, Desert Transport Solutions, charged a flat fee of $2,000 for delivery within the Phoenix metro area. I called them on the Thursday before to arrange pickup. "We can have it to you Sunday afternoon," the dispatcher, a woman named Rita, told me. "Probably around 3 or 4 o'clock. "Perfect. My address is 4782 Desert Sage Drive in Scottsdale. It's a residential neighborhood, but there's plenty of space. Just bring it around the side gate and we'll park it behind the house." "Sounds good. We'll call you an hour before arrival." Sunday morning, I got up early and prepared the site. I moved my other equipment to make room, laid down plywood to protect my lawn from the weight, and made sure the gate was open. The excavator was going to be transported on a specialized lowboy trailer pulled by a heavy-duty semi-truck, and I wanted everything ready for a smooth delivery. Rita called me at 2:30. "We're about 45 minutes out." "Great, I'm ready." The truck arrived right on schedule, rumbling down my quiet residential street with its hazard lights flashing. The driver, a burly guy in his 50s named Chuck, climbed out and walked up my driveway to introduce himself. "Yuri, I'm Chuck. Beautiful day for a delivery. Let me take a look at where you want this thing." We walked around to the back of my house. Chuck surveyed the setup and nodded approvingly. "Nice and level. This should be easy. Give me about 30 minutes to unload and we'll be out of your hair." He returned to his truck and began the process of positioning the trailer. The lowboy was about 40 feet long, and he needed to angle it just right to access my side gate. He pulled forward, began backing up, and that's when I saw Deborah's white Mercedes SUV turn onto our street. She slowed as she passed the truck, then made a U-turn and parked directly behind it, blocking its path. "What the hell?" Chuck muttered. Deborah climbed out of her Mercedes and marched toward us. She was dressed in slacks and a blazer, looking like she'd just come from somewhere important. Her face was already red with anger. "You cannot have this truck here," she shouted before she'd even reached us. Deborah, this is a legal equipment delivery to my property. It'll be done in 30 minutes. I don't care. This is a residential street, not a highway for your construction equipment. You need to move this truck immediately. Chuck stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. Madam, I'm making a legal delivery to this address. I'll be done shortly, and then I'll be out of your way. I'm the HOA president, and I'm telling you this is not allowed. Move your truck now, or I'm calling the police. You're welcome to call the police, I said, but I have every right to receive deliveries at my home. This is no different than if I'd ordered a new refrigerator. A refrigerator doesn't require a semi-truck blocking the entire street. I'm not blocking the street, Chuck said, gesturing to the space around us. There's plenty of room for cars to pass, and as I said, I'll be done in 30 minutes. Deborah ignored him and pulled out her phone. We'll see what the police have to say about this. She walked back to her Mercedes, which was still parked directly behind Chuck's trailer, and made her call. Chuck looked at me with raised eyebrows. Is she always like this? Unfortunately, yes. She's been harassing me for months. Well, I've got a delivery to make. If her car's in my way, she'll need to move it. Chuck climbed back into his truck and finished positioning the trailer. By the time he'd lowered the ramps and started releasing the tie-downs on the excavator, a Scottsdale police cruiser had arrived. 2 officers got out, a young guy who looked fresh out of the academy and a veteran officer with gray hair and a weathered face. The older officer's nameplate read, Ramirez. Deborah rushed over to them before they could approach us. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but she was gesturing wildly at Chuck's truck and then at my house. Officer Ramirez listened patiently, then walked over to where Chuck and I were standing. Afternoon, gentlemen. I understand there's a dispute about this delivery. No dispute on our end, I said. I'm Yuri Anderson. This is my house, and I'm receiving a legal equipment delivery. That woman is our HOA president, and she's been harassing me for months. The lady says you're violating HOA rules by having this truck here. The HOA doesn't have authority over public streets, and I'm legally entitled to receive deliveries at my home. This gentleman is simply doing his job. Officer Ramirez nodded slowly. Do you have any documentation about the delivery? Chuck produced his paperwork, showing the rental agreement, the transport order, and the delivery address. Officer Ramirez reviewed it all carefully. Everything looks legitimate, he said finally. Sir, you're within your rights to complete this delivery. Thank you, officer. The problem is that woman has parked her car behind my trailer, and I need her to move it so I can maneuver. We all looked at Deborah's Mercedes, which was indeed blocking Chuck's ability to finish positioning his trailer. Officer Ramirez walked back to Deborah. Madam, you need to move your vehicle. You're blocking a legal delivery. I'm not moving anything until that truck leaves this neighborhood. Madam, the truck has every right to be here. If you don't move your vehicle, I'll have to cite you for obstruction. Obstruction? I'm trying to protect this neighborhood. I'm the HOA president, and I have authority not over public streets. You don't, Officer Ramirez said, his patience clearly wearing thin. You need to move your car now. I refuse. The younger officer, whose nameplate read Martinez, stepped forward. Madam, this is your last warning. Move the vehicle or you'll be cited. Deborah crossed her arms. I'm not moving. Officer Ramirez sighed and pulled out his citation book. What's your name, madam? Deborah Patterson, and I'm calling my lawyer. That's your right. But I'm still citing you for obstruction. He began writing the ticket. Deborah's face went from red to purple. This is ridiculous. I'm the victim here. That man has been violating HOA rules for months, parking his equipment, creating noise and pollution. Madam, HOA disputes are civil matters. What you're doing right now, blocking this delivery, is a criminal matter. Now I'm going to ask you one more time to move your vehicle. If you refuse, I'll have no choice but to place you under arrest. Arrest? For what? Obstruction and refusal to comply with a lawful order. I expected her to back down at that point. Most reasonable people would. But Deborah wasn't reasonable. I'm not moving. This is my neighborhood, and I won't let him turn it into a construction yard. Officer Ramirez exchanged a look with Officer Martinez, then shook his head. Madam, turn around and place your hands behind your back. What? You can't be serious. I'm very serious. You're under arrest for obstruction. You have the right to remain silent. This is insane. I know the mayor. I know the police chief. You're making a huge mistake. But Officer Ramirez continued reading her Miranda rights, while Officer Martinez gently took her arm and guided her hands behind her back. The handcuffs clicked into place, and Deborah's expression shifted from outrage to shock. You're actually arresting me for trying to protect my neighborhood. No, madam. I'm arresting you for blocking a legal delivery and refusing a lawful order. There's a difference. They led her to the patrol car. Deborah twisted around to shout at me. This is your fault, Yuri. I'll make sure you pay for this. Officer Ramirez turned to me. Do you want to press additional charges for harassment? I thought about it. Part of me wanted to, but I also didn't want to escalate things further. Not right now, but I've been documenting her behavior for months if that changes. Smart. Keep those records. And here's a case number for today's incident. He handed me a card with information written on it. After they drove away with Deborah in the back seat, Chuck let out a low whistle. Well, that was entertaining. I've had difficult deliveries before, but never one that ended in an arrest. Sorry about all that. Not your fault, man. Some people just can't help themselves. Now let's get this excavator off my trailer before anything else crazy happens. The unloading process took another 20 minutes. Chuck was a professional, carefully driving the massive excavator down the ramps and positioning it exactly where I wanted it behind my house. Once it was settled, he folded up the ramps, secured everything on his trailer, and prepared to leave. Just need you to sign here confirming delivery, he said, handing me a clipboard. I signed, and he climbed back into his truck. Good luck with your project. And hey, maybe invest in a bigger fence to keep that crazy lady out. He drove off, and I stood there looking at my newly delivered excavator, still processing what had just happened. Deborah had actually been arrested. I'd wanted her to leave me alone, but I'd never imagined it would go that far. My phone rang. It was Marcus, my attorney. Yuri, I just got the strangest call from Deborah Patterson's lawyer. Something about you having her arrested. Yeah, that just happened. She blocked my equipment delivery and refused to move her car when the police asked her to. They arrested her for obstruction. Marcus laughed. Seriously. She got herself arrested over your equipment. I couldn't make this up if I tried. Well, document everything. Take photos of your equipment, save any correspondence, and keep that police report. If she tries to retaliate, we'll have a strong case for a restraining order. I spent the rest of the evening doing exactly that. I took photos from every angle, wrote down a detailed timeline of events, and emailed everything to Marcus. Then I tried to relax, though I kept expecting Deborah to show up at my door. She didn't come that night, but the next morning I got an email from the HOA. Deborah had called an emergency board meeting for Tuesday evening to discuss my ongoing violations and harassment of HOA leadership. I forwarded the email to Marcus. His response was immediate. Don't worry. I'll be there. The Tuesday meeting was packed. Word had spread about Deborah's arrest, and it seemed like half the neighborhood had shown up to watch the drama unfold. Deborah sat at the board table looking composed, though I noticed her hands were shaking slightly as she shuffled papers. She called the meeting to order, and immediately launched into her complaints. This emergency meeting has been called to address the continued violations by Yuri Anderson and his harassment of HOA leadership. As many of you know, Mr. Anderson had me arrested on Sunday for trying to enforce our community standards. That's not what happened, I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Deborah's eyes flashed. You'll have your turn to speak, Mr. Anderson. Right now, I'm presenting the facts. You have repeatedly violated our covenants by parking commercial equipment on your property. When I attempted to prevent yet another violation on Sunday, you had me arrested. Marcus stood up. I'm Marcus Chen, Mr. Anderson's attorney, and I need to stop you right there, Miss Patterson. My client didn't have you arrested. The Scottsdale police arrested you for obstruction after you refused multiple lawful orders to move your vehicle. That's a matter of public record. I was trying to protect this neighborhood. You were breaking the law, Marcus said calmly. And you've been harassing my client for months, despite having no legal authority to restrict his property use. We have documentation of dozens of frivolous violation notices, all of which have been proven baseless. Gerald, the treasurer, cleared his throat. Deborah, I think we need to address the elephant in the room. You were arrested. That reflects poorly on the HOA and on your leadership. I was arrested because of him, Deborah pointed at me. He's deliberately trying to undermine my authority. You don't have authority over public streets, Sarah, the secretary, said quietly. And we already determined months ago that his property is exempted from the equipment restrictions. Why are you still pursuing this? Because he's making a mockery of everything we stand for. This is a residential neighborhood, not a commercial zone, Gerald finished. Yes, we've heard this speech before. But the fact remains that Mr. Anderson is operating within his legal rights and you've been harassing him. I move that we censure the president for abuse of authority and recommend she step down. The room erupted. Half the people started talking at once, some supporting the motion, others defending Deborah. It took several minutes for order to be restored. There's a motion on the floor, Gerald said. Do I have a second? Second, Sarah said immediately. All in favor of censuring the president, 3 hands went up. Gerald, Sarah, and one of the at-large members. Opposed, Deborah and the other at-large member raised their hands. Motion carries. Deborah, you're officially censured. I strongly recommend you resign. Deborah stood up so fast her chair fell backward. I will not resign. This board needs strong leadership, and I'm the only one willing to provide it. You're all letting this neighborhood go to hell because you're too weak to enforce the rules. The rules you're trying to enforce don't apply to Mr. Anderson's property, Gerald said firmly. And your behavior has become erratic and concerning. For the good of the community, please step down. Never. She grabbed her papers and stormed out of the community center, leaving her fallen chair on the floor behind her. The meeting continued without her, with Gerald temporarily assuming the president's duties. He apologized to me publicly and promised there would be no further harassment from the HOA. Most of the residents came up to me afterward to express their support and apologize for Deborah's behavior. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong again. The next week, I was out at the temp job site when I got a call from my neighbor, Tom Jenkins. Yuri, you need to get home. Deborah is at your house with some kind of tow truck, and she's trying to take your equipment. What? She can't do that. I'm watching from my yard right now. She's got a flatbed truck here and she's arguing with the driver, pointing at your excavator. I jumped in my truck and drove as fast as I legally could back to Scottsdale. When I arrived 20 minutes later, there was indeed a flatbed tow truck in my driveway, though the excavator was still in my backyard where I'd left it. Deborah was standing near the back gate, talking on her phone while a confused-looking tow truck driver stood nearby. I parked and approached them. "What's going on here?" The driver, a young guy in a company uniform, looked relieved to see me. "Are you the homeowner?" "I am. Yuri Anderson." "This lady says she has authority to have this equipment removed, but I'm not comfortable with that. She doesn't have any paperwork, and this is private property." "She has no authority whatsoever. She's the HOA president, and she's been harassing me for months." Deborah ended her phone call and turned to me. "That equipment is illegally parked, and I'm having it removed." "No, you're not. And if you don't leave my property right now, I'm calling the police." "I'm not on your property. I'm on the HOA's property. You're standing in my driveway." "That's my property. The covenants give the HOA access to all properties for enforcement purposes." I pulled out my phone. "We'll let the police sort this out." I dialed 911 and reported trespassing. Deborah stood her ground, arms crossed, while the tow truck driver backed away from both of us. "Look, man, I don't want any part of this," he said. "I'm leaving." "Wait," Deborah said. "I'll pay you double your fee, lady. I'm not getting involved in whatever this is. You two need to work this out." He climbed in his truck and drove away. The police arrived 10 minutes later. It was Officer Ramirez again, this time with a different partner. "We meet again," he said, sounding tired. "What's the problem now?" I explained that Deborah had come onto my property and attempted to have my equipment towed without authorization. Deborah immediately launched into her own explanation about HOA authority and my supposed violations. Officer Ramirez held up a hand. "Miss Patterson, didn't I just arrest you on Sunday for obstruction related to this exact same equipment? That was different. I was protecting the neighborhood. And now you're trespassing and attempting to steal this man's property." "It's not stealing. I'm enforcing community standards." "Do you have a court order authorizing the removal of this equipment?" "No. But as HOA president, then you're trespassing and attempting theft." "Madam, I'm going to need you to leave this property immediately." "I'm not leaving until that equipment is removed." Officer Ramirez's expression hardened. "Miss Patterson, you're already facing charges from Sunday. Do you really want to add to them?" "I'm standing up for what's right. You're breaking the law, again, for the second time in a week." He turned to his partner. "Read her rights." "You're arresting me again." Deborah's voice rose to a shriek. "This is persecution. I'm being targeted because I'm trying to do my job." "No, madam. You're being arrested because you're trespassing and attempting to commit theft. Turn around, please." For the second time in less than a week, I watched Deborah get handcuffed and placed in the back of a police cruiser. As they drove away, she stared at me through the window with pure hatred. Tom Jenkins walked over from his yard. "That was intense. She's really lost it, hasn't she?" "Apparently." "I just wanted to run my business and live in peace." "Well, you've definitely got documentation now if you need a restraining order." Marcus called me an hour later. "Deborah's lawyer just contacted me. She's been arrested again. Tried to have my equipment towed from my own property." "Yuri, this has gone beyond HOA harassment. She's now committed multiple crimes. I think we need to file for a restraining order immediately." "Agreed. Can you handle that?" "I'll have the paperwork filed by tomorrow morning, and I'd recommend you install security cameras if you haven't already. If she violates the restraining order, we'll need evidence." I spent the next 2 days installing a comprehensive security system around my property. 8 cameras covering every angle, motion-activated lights, and a video doorbell. It felt like overkill, but given Deborah's behavior, I wasn't taking chances. The restraining order was approved on Friday. Marcus had it served to Deborah at her home, requiring her to stay at least 100 yards away from me and my property. She was also forbidden from contacting me directly or through third parties. I hoped that would finally be the end of it. But on Monday morning, I woke up to find all 4 of my truck tires slashed in my driveway. The security cameras had captured everything. At 3 in the morning, a figure dressed in dark clothing and a ski mask had crept up my driveway and methodically punctured each tire with what looked like an ice pick. The person's build and movements were consistent with Deborah, though the mask made positive identification impossible. I called the police and filed a report, then called Marcus. "The cameras don't show her face," I told him, "but it's obviously her. Same build, same walk, and who else would do this? Send me the footage. I'll take it to the police and argue for a violation of the restraining order." The circumstantial evidence is pretty strong. The detective assigned to my case, a woman named Detective Sarah Brennan, reviewed the footage carefully. "You're right that we can't positively identify the perpetrator. But given the context, the recent history, and the violation of the restraining order's spirit if not its letter, I think we have enough to bring her in for questioning." They brought Deborah in that afternoon. I wasn't present for the interview, but Detective Brennan called me afterward. She denied everything, of course. Said she was home asleep at 3 in the morning and has no idea who would have vandalized your truck. But here's the interesting part. When we asked if she'd consent to a search of her property, she refused and immediately called her lawyer. That's suspicious. Very. We're working on getting a search warrant. If she has the tools or clothing from the video, we'll find them. The search warrant was executed the next day. I learned about the results from Detective Brennan in a phone call that evening. We found the ice pick in her garage. It had traces of rubber on it consistent with tire composition. We also found a ski mask and dark clothing that match what the person in your video was wearing. She's being charged with vandalism, violation of a restraining order, and criminal mischief. Will she go to jail? She's being held on $10,000 bail. Given her history of arrests in the past week, the judge wasn't inclined to be lenient, and there's more. What? During the property search, we found evidence of other crimes. She had files on dozens of residents in your HOA, including what appears to be illegally obtained financial information, medical records, and personal correspondence. We're expanding the investigation. How did she get that information? We're still figuring that out. But it looks like she's been conducting what amounts to stalking and identity theft on multiple people in your neighborhood. This is much bigger than your equipment dispute. Over the next few weeks, the case grew. Deborah had apparently been using her position as HOA president to gain access to people's homes under false pretenses, then snooping through their mail and documents. She'd photographed bank statements, medical bills, and personal letters, all filed away in her home office in meticulously labeled folders. The county attorney's office charged her with multiple felonies: identity theft, stalking, burglary, and fraud. The bail was increased to $50,000, which she couldn't make. She remained in jail pending trial, but the most surprising development came in April. Detective Brennan called me with news I hadn't expected. "Did you know Deborah Patterson is a licensed pilot?" "What? No." She never mentioned that. She has a private pilot's license and apparently flies regularly out of Scottsdale Airport. She owns a small single-engine Cessna. What does that have to do with anything? The FAA requires pilots to report any arrests or convictions. Given her multiple arrests and pending felony charges, they're reviewing her medical certificate and her pilot's license. There's a good chance both will be revoked. She's going to lose her pilot's license because of this, very likely. The FAA takes criminal behavior seriously, especially anything involving dishonesty or lack of judgment. All her arrests stem from decisions that show poor judgment and disregard for authority. That's exactly the kind of thing that gets a pilot grounded. I'd never thought about how far the consequences of her actions would spread. I just wanted her to leave me alone. Now she was facing years in prison and losing something that was apparently important to her. Part of me felt bad. But then I remembered her face when she'd tried to have my equipment towed, the slashed tires, the months of harassment. She'd brought all of this on herself. The HOA moved quickly to remove her as president. Gerald took over permanently, and one of the first things he did was issue a formal apology to me and several other residents who'd been targeted by Deborah's campaign. They also implemented new oversight procedures to prevent any future president from abusing their authority. The criminal case moved slowly through the courts. Deborah's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the county attorney's office wasn't interested. They had overwhelming evidence, and they wanted to make an example of her behavior. In June, I received a subpoena to testify at her trial. I'd been dreading it, but Marcus assured me it would be straightforward. Just tell the truth about what happened. The prosecution has all the evidence they need. Your testimony is just one piece of a much larger case. The trial began on a scorching Monday in July. The courthouse in downtown Phoenix was packed with people from our HOA and other neighborhoods where Deborah had apparently caused similar problems before moving to Saguaro Springs. It turned out she had a history of this behavior going back years. I testified on the second day. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Jennifer Walsh, walked me through the timeline of events. The initial violation notice, the hearing, the blocked delivery, the attempted towing, the slashed tires. Deborah's lawyer tried to make me look vindictive during cross-examination, but I stuck to the facts. Isn't it true, Mr. Anderson, that you deliberately antagonized my client by parking commercial equipment in a residential neighborhood? No, I parked equipment on my own property, which I'm legally entitled to do under the deed restrictions. But you knew it upset Miss Patterson. She made that clear, but her being upset doesn't give her the right to break the law. You had her arrested twice in 1 week. I didn't have her arrested. The police arrested her for breaking the law. I was simply trying to receive a legal delivery and protect my property. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Witness after witness testified about Deborah's behavior, the stolen information, the harassment. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Deborah's sentencing hearing was scheduled for September. I didn't attend, but Marcus did and called me afterward with the results. She got 5 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 3. The judge was not sympathetic. He called her behavior a systematic campaign of harassment and criminal activity, and said she'd shown no remorse. 5 years. That seems harsh for HOA disputes. It's not about the HOA anymore. It's about the identity theft, the burglary, the stalking. Those are serious crimes. Plus, the judge considered her multiple arrests and the fact that she kept committing crimes even after being warned. She showed a pattern of behavior that suggested she'd continue if not imprisoned. What about her pilot's license? Revoked. The FAA sent her a letter last month. She's permanently barred from holding any aviation certificates. I sat with that information for a while. Deborah Patterson had gone from HOA president to convicted felon in less than 6 months, all because she couldn't accept that she didn't have authority over my property. The story should have ended there, but there was one more twist. In October, about a month after Deborah's sentencing, I received a letter from her in prison. It had been forwarded through Marcus's office since she wasn't allowed to contact me directly. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten, on lined notebook paper. In it, Deborah apologized for everything she'd done. She explained that she'd been going through a difficult time in her personal life, that her husband had left her, that she'd lost her job as an airline operations manager, and that becoming HOA president had been her way of trying to regain some sense of control. She wrote that she understood now how wrong she'd been, that she'd let her need for control turn into obsession, and then into criminal behavior. She didn't expect forgiveness, but she wanted me to know that she was sorry and that she was getting mental health treatment in prison. The letter ended with a request. Would I be willing to write a letter supporting her parole when she became eligible in 3 years? I read the letter several times, trying to decide if it was genuine or just another manipulation. Marcus advised me not to respond. She's not allowed to contact you. Responding would acknowledge the contact and potentially open a line of communication you don't want. If the letter is genuine, she'll understand why you don't reply. If it's manipulation, your silence shuts it down. I took his advice and filed the letter away. Life gradually returned to normal. I completed the medical complex project in temp on time and under budget, which led to 3 more major contracts. My business thrived. The new HOA leadership under Gerald was reasonable and professional. I never received another frivolous violation notice. Tom Jenkins and I became good friends. He helped me expand my back patio that fall, and I helped him install a new irrigation system. The neighborhood felt peaceful in a way it hadn't since Deborah had moved in. In November, I was having dinner with my girlfriend Amanda Sullivan, a landscape architect I'd met through work. We were sitting on my back patio, watching the sun set over the desert, when she asked about the excavator parked nearby. "Is that the one that caused all the trouble?" "That's the one." Though technically it didn't cause any trouble, Deborah's inability to accept the law caused the trouble. Do you ever think about her, wonder how she's doing? Sometimes. I got a letter from her in October. She apologized. Really? Was it genuine? I don't know, maybe. Marcus advised me not to respond. Amanda was quiet for a moment. "Do you think you'll write that parole letter she asked for?" "I've thought about it. Part of me wants to be the bigger person, show some compassion. But another part of me remembers the harassment, the arrests, the slashed tires. She put me through hell for months. You don't owe her anything. I know. But I can't help wondering if showing some mercy might help her more than punishing her further. You're a good person, Yuri. Whatever you decide, I'll support you." I didn't decide that night or that month. It was something I sat with, turning over in my mind during quiet moments. In December, I got a call from Gerald about the HOA's holiday party. "We're planning something nice this year at the community center. Good food, live music, the works. We want to celebrate putting all that drama behind us. Will you come?" "Sure. Can I bring Amanda?" "Absolutely. The more the merrier." The party was on a Saturday evening, 2 weeks before Christmas. Amanda and I arrived fashionably late to find the community center transformed with lights, decorations, and a buffet that looked professionally catered. Nearly every resident of Saguaro Springs was there, talking and laughing in small groups. Gerald approached us with a smile and 2 glasses of wine. "Yuri, Amanda, so glad you could make it. Help yourselves to food and drinks." As the evening went on, several neighbors came up to me to express their gratitude for how I'd handled the situation with Deborah. A woman named Patricia Rogers, who lived at the opposite end of the subdivision, pulled me aside. "I need to thank you," she said quietly. Deborah had been harassing me too. She'd somehow gotten copies of my medical records and was threatening to share information about my cancer diagnosis unless I supported her various initiatives. When the police searched her house and found all those files, they contacted me. "I'm pressing charges too. Your willingness to stand up to her gave me the courage to do the same." I hadn't known about that. I'm sorry you went through that. Don't be sorry. If you hadn't fought back, she'd still be terrorizing all of us. You did this neighborhood a huge service." Similar stories came out throughout the evening. Deborah had been blackmailing, threatening, and manipulating dozens of people. My refusal to back down had brought it all to light. Driving home that night, Amanda squeezed my hand. "You really did help a lot of people." I was just trying to protect my business and my property. Sometimes standing up for yourself helps others too. That's worth celebrating. The holidays passed peacefully. I spent Christmas with my family in Flagstaff, New Year's with Amanda in San Diego. My business continued to grow. Life was good. In January, almost exactly a year after the first delivery incident, I received another letter from Deborah. This one was shorter, just a single page. She wrote that she understood why I hadn't responded to her first letter and that she didn't expect a response to this one either. She simply wanted me to know that she'd completed 6 months of intensive therapy, that she'd been diagnosed with and was being treated for several mental health conditions, and that she was working every day to become a better person. She wrote that she'd thought a lot about what had happened and realized that her behavior toward me had been a symptom of much deeper problems. Losing control of her personal and professional life had made her desperate to control something, anything, and I'd become the target of that desperation. The letter ended with a simple statement. "I don't expect your forgiveness, but I want you to know that what happened changed my life. I'm becoming the person I should have been all along. Thank you for holding me accountable." This letter felt different than the first one. There was no request, no attempt to manipulate, just an acknowledgement and a thank you. I showed it to Amanda over dinner that evening. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I think I'm going to write back, not to say I forgive her or that I'll support her parole. Just to acknowledge her letter and wish her well in her recovery. That seems fair." I spent a few days composing my response. I kept it brief and factual. I acknowledged her apology and her apparent growth. I wished her well in her treatment and her future. I made no promises about parole letters or future contact. Marcus reviewed it before I sent it. "This is fine. You're not committing to anything, just responding as one human to another, though I'd still advise caution. I know, but I think this is the right thing to do." I sent the letter through the prison system and didn't expect a response. I didn't get one. Spring arrived, bringing with it the desert wildflowers that make Arizona beautiful. My business landed another major contract, this one for a new shopping complex in Mesa. The excavator that had caused so much trouble was now earning me money hand over fist. The HOA, under Gerald's leadership, implemented several new programs that actually benefited the community. Quarterly neighborhood cleanups, a welcome committee for new residents, and a revised set of covenants that clarified rules and eliminated the ambiguous sections Deborah had tried to exploit. Gerald stopped by my house one afternoon in May to discuss a new initiative. "We're thinking of creating a community garden on that empty lot behind your property. Would you be willing to donate some equipment time to help us grade and prepare the site?" "Absolutely. When do you want to start?" "Next month. We need to finalize some details with the landscaper, but we're excited about it. Just let me know when you're ready." He paused before leaving. "I've been meaning to tell you, Yuri, your handling of the situation with Deborah impressed a lot of people. We've had inquiries from other HOAs asking about what happened and how we resolved it. You've kind of become a legend in local HOA circles." I laughed. "That's not exactly the kind of fame I was looking for." "Well, you've got it anyway." Standing up to abuse of authority takes courage, especially when it would have been easier to just move your equipment and avoid the conflict. It wasn't about courage. It was about principle. I bought this property specifically because it allowed me to operate my business. I wasn't going to let someone with a power complex take that away. That's exactly what I mean. A lot of people would have backed down. After he left, I stood in my backyard looking at the equipment that had sparked such chaos. The excavator sat quietly on its plywood platform, ready for the next job. It was just a machine, a tool for my business. But it had become a symbol of something larger. The right to use your own property lawfully, the importance of standing up to bullies, and the consequences when authority is abused. In July, I got an unexpected visit from Officer Ramirez. He was in civilian clothes and he looked older than I remembered. "Mr. Anderson, I hope I'm not intruding. I'm actually retired now, but I wanted to stop by and tell you something." "Of course. Come in." We sat in my living room and he explained why he'd come. "I've been a police officer for 32 years. I've dealt with thousands of disputes, arrests, and conflicts. The situation with Deborah Patterson was one of the most unusual I've encountered, because of how she escalated things, partly, but also because of how you handled it. You stayed calm, you documented everything, you followed the law, and you didn't let anger drive your decisions. That's rare. Most people in your situation would have done something stupid that would have gotten them in trouble too. I had good advice from my attorney." "Sure, but you also had good judgment. And I wanted you to know that your case became a training example at the department. We use it to teach new officers about HOA disputes, de-escalation, and how quickly situations can spiral when people abuse whatever authority they have." I had no idea. "The other thing I wanted to tell you is that Patterson's case led to a broader investigation into HOA abuses in Scottsdale and Phoenix. Several other HOA presidents have been charged with similar crimes. Your willingness to stand up and push back started a domino effect." After Officer Ramirez left, I sat for a while thinking about the unexpected consequences of what had happened. I'd just been trying to protect my business and my property rights. I never imagined it would lead to criminal investigations, training scenarios, and changes in how HOAs operated across the region. Amanda came over that evening, and I told her about Officer Ramirez's visit. "You know what this means, right?" she said. "You're stuck being the HOA hero." "I'm not a hero, I just didn't back down from a bully." "That's literally what heroes do, Yuri. Heroes rescue people from burning buildings. I just wanted to park my equipment in peace." She laughed. "Sometimes the smallest acts of courage have the biggest impacts. You should be proud." I thought about that. Was I proud? I hadn't enjoyed any of what happened. The stress, the conflict, the police calls, the trial testimony. But looking back, I was glad I hadn't backed down. Not just for myself, but for all the other people Deborah had been victimizing. In September, 3 years after Deborah's sentencing, I received a notice that she was applying for parole. The letter asked if I wanted to submit a statement supporting or opposing her release. I discussed it with Amanda, with Marcus, and with Gerald. Everyone had different opinions. Marcus was cautious. "You have no obligation to support her release. She committed multiple crimes against you." Gerald was pragmatic. "She's probably learned her lesson. 3 years in prison is a long time." Amanda was thoughtful. "What does your gut tell you?" I thought about it for several days. Then I wrote a letter to the parole board. In it, I described what Deborah had done: the harassment, the arrests, the vandalism, the attempted theft. I didn't minimize any of it. But I also acknowledged her letters, her apparent recognition of her problems, and her efforts at treatment. I concluded by saying that, while I couldn't personally vouch for her rehabilitation, I believed everyone deserved a chance at redemption. I neither supported nor opposed her parole, but I trusted the board to make the right decision based on all the evidence. It felt like the most honest response I could give. Deborah was granted parole in November. I learned about it from a brief mention in the local news. She'd served 3 years and 4 months of her 5-year sentence. The conditions of her parole included continued mental health treatment, no contact with any of her victims, and relocation outside of Scottsdale. I never saw or heard from her again. Life continued. My business grew large enough that I hired 2 additional employees and bought a second property in Glendale to store equipment. Amanda and I got engaged in December, with plans for a spring wedding. The HOA Community Garden project was completed, and it became a source of pride for the neighborhood. Families gathered there on weekends to tend vegetables and socialize. It was everything an HOA should be: bringing people together, improving the community, and making the neighborhood a better place to live. One Saturday afternoon in January, 4 years after the delivery incident that started everything, I was working in the community garden with Amanda and several neighbors when a woman I didn't recognize approached me. "Excuse me, are you Yuri Anderson?" "I am." "I'm Jennifer Walsh." I was the prosecutor in the Deborah Patterson case. "I remember. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to thank you. Your case led to significant reforms in how HOA complaints are handled in Maricopa County. We now have a task force specifically dedicated to HOA abuse, and we've prosecuted 15 cases in the past 3 years that probably would have gone unaddressed before Patterson. I'm glad something good came from it. More than good. You probably saved dozens of people from harassment, theft, and worse. The patterns we found in Patterson's behavior showed she would have continued and escalated if you hadn't stopped her. After she left, Amanda put her arm around my waist. "Still think you're not a hero?" "I think I'm a guy who wanted to park his excavator and ended up accidentally fixing a systemic problem." Accidentally heroic is still heroic. We worked in the garden until sunset, surrounded by neighbors and friends, in a community that had been transformed by standing up for what was right. Looking back on everything that happened, I realized that the confrontation with Deborah had taught me something important. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is also the right thing to do. It would have been easier to move my equipment, to avoid the conflict, to let her win. But taking the easy path would have enabled her behavior and hurt everyone else she targeted. Standing firm on principle, documenting everything, following the law, and refusing to be intimidated had consequences I never anticipated. Deborah lost her freedom, her pilot's license, and her reputation. But she also got the mental health treatment she clearly needed, and hopefully, she'd build a better life after parole. As for me, I got to keep running my business. I found a great partner in Amanda, and I learned that sometimes fighting for your rights means fighting for everyone's rights. The excavator still sits in my backyard, behind my fence, invisible from the street. It's just a machine, doing the work I need it to do. But every time I look at it, I'm reminded of the year when an HOA president's obsession with control spiraled into criminal behavior, and how refusing to back down from a bully can change everything. Gerald remained HOA president, doing an excellent job of balancing community needs with individual rights. The neighborhood flourished under his leadership, with property values rising and residents actually enjoying the community events and initiatives. Tom Jenkins and I continued our friendship, often working on projects together on weekends. He'd been one of my strongest supporters throughout the ordeal with Deborah, and I valued his steady presence. The security cameras I'd installed during the conflict remained active, though now they mostly captured footage of wildlife wandering through my yard at night. The javelinas and coyotes were far less troublesome than Deborah had ever been. My wedding to Amanda was held at a beautiful desert venue in Carefree, Arizona, in April. Many of our neighbors attended, celebrating not just our union, but the community we'd all built together after the chaos had settled. Gerald gave a toast mentioning how sometimes the worst situations lead to the best outcomes, and how our neighborhood had emerged stronger from its trials. On our honeymoon in Costa Rica, Amanda and I talked about the future. We wanted to start a family, maybe expand the house, definitely continue growing the business. The drama with Deborah felt like ancient history now, a story we'd tell someday about the time when standing up for what was right had unexpected consequences. When we returned home, I found myself grateful for everything that had happened, even the difficult parts. The conflict had revealed the strength of my community, the importance of good leadership, and the value of principle over convenience. The excavator that had sparked everything continued, earning its keep on job sites across the Phoenix metro area. It was just a tool, but it had become a symbol of something more. The right to live peacefully on your own property, the importance of resisting abuse of power, and the unexpected ways that standing firm can create positive change. In the end, Deborah Patterson's attempt to control me had backfired completely. She'd lost everything while trying to take away my right to operate legally on my own property. I'd gained a stronger community, lasting friendships, a wonderful wife, and the knowledge that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, is always worth it. The story of the HOA president who blocked my equipment delivery, got arrested twice, and lost her pilot's license became a cautionary tale in Scottsdale and beyond. It was discussed in HOA board meetings, cited in legal proceedings, and used as a training example for law enforcement. But for me, it was simpler than all that. It was about a man who wanted to run his business in peace, a woman who couldn't accept the limits of her authority, and the consequences that followed when obsession met the law. As I sat on my back patio that evening, watching the Arizona sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, I felt at peace. The excavator hummed quietly as I performed routine maintenance, preparing it for the next job. Amanda was inside making dinner, our neighbors were friendly, and the HOA was functioning exactly as it should. Sometimes justice means dramatic courtroom victories and life-changing sentences. Sometimes it means prison time and lost licenses. But sometimes, justice is simpler than that. Sometimes it's just being able to park your equipment on your own property without harassment, living peacefully in your home, and knowing that standing up for your rights was the right choice, no matter how difficult it became. The heavy equipment that Deborah had tried so hard to remove remained exactly where it belonged, on my property, serving my business, and reminding me every day that principle matters more than convenience, that courage sometimes means simply refusing to back down, and that standing up to bullies, even when they have titles and authority, is always worth the fight.